Welcome back to Trials Talk podcast, episode 17. We have been a bit remiss, actually. Again, we haven't done a podcast for, I think it's about 2 months now. So we really need to get our backsides in gear and try and get a few more out. We've sort of missed all the end of the season and all that good stuff, unfortunately, but looking forward to next season. Obviously, as many of you will know, there is a big change coming in everything ACU, TrialGB, youth, ladies, all that good stuff. So thought it might be worthwhile. I know there was an open Zoom meeting a few weeks ago, but thought it might be worthwhile to get Sam, who has been given the unenviable task of trying to coordinate all this. So thought it might be a good idea to get Sam on and just talk through a few things, ask him a few questions about it and whatever else. So thank you very much, Sam, for taking the time out of your, I know it's a very busy schedule that you've given yourself, and you're getting more and more involved in this stuff and you weren't necessarily planning on that. But thank you very much for taking the time coming along.
It's a pleasure. I mean, I've definitely been sucked in, that's for sure.
You tend to do that.
I sort of my head above the parapet last year, then one thing after another, and you just end up consuming more of all of this. But it's good fun. Yeah.
Yeah. I find it quite rewarding. I have actually sort of taken on a few new roles there recently within our governing body as well, as I said to you. They've taken over the chairman of our trials committee position, and I've also taken a role on our commission, which sort of coordinates what happens between the north and the south of Ireland as well. So yeah, that's 2 more meetings a month I didn't really need, but sure, there you go. It's all good fun.
The thing is though, like, even to that, it's often spoke about, but there isn't enough people actually coming forwards to contribute, like physically contribute with things,
Yeah.
which is a real shame. And that, like jumping into the ACU stuff. I mean, the people on the committee, they've been there for a long time, but it's not as if there's like a queue of people lining up saying, "Well, I'll come and help." And it is quite interesting because I've been a lot more involved the last few years with the ACU at rugby. And whilst it can be frustrating at times, at the end of the day, they're just a load of volunteers. You
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and I think that goes across the country though. Like when you speak to the clubs, they're all sort of struggle because there's not enough of the younger members that are willing to come along and sit in the committee meetings and then go and deal with the landowners and go and put the trials on and all that sort of stuff. But the riders are always quick to,
Yeah.
contribute their feedback without sort of getting stuck in.
Yeah. I think
But
that's Hugo trying to join us now. So
yeah, here we go, Hugo.
good evening, Hugo.
Evening, how you doing?
You've not missed very much. We've literally only just started. So we were just saying about manpower and clubs and all that sort of stuff. There's not exactly a lot of people running along to help out at some of these things.
No, you're right. It's quite limited, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ours is the same.
I think yes, that's what Sam just said. It's probably the same, across the country. I mean, it's unfortunate to say it, but it is literally a dying sport.
Yeah,
there's very few youth over here at the moment.
I feel like I've been noticing that more recently in a way. Don't know whether it's just become noticeable, but it definitely seems like numbers are dropping and there's less events on and everything.
Yeah. Right. We will crack on with our sort of agenda here, which was to talk about the new TrialGB Championship. Obviously, the main TrialGB Championship is going to be contested over 4 weekends, each weekend consisting of 2 scoring rounds. The format within that is going to change again slightly. It's going to go from 3 laps of 12 sections to 2 laps of 12 sections. Within that, there is also going to be separate classes now for ladies, girls, and youth, with an extra line as well for the sort of trial 2 ladies. Am I correct, Sam, in saying that? Correct me at any point here if I'm going off piste. So that's the main sort of change there. There's also changes in the age groups, in the youth championships as well, as I understand it. Maybe you can fill us in on that. But those are the sort of main points, I suppose, that the new championship's been formatted around. And I know you've been obviously you were sort of, as I said, brought in to sort of oversee that. So I mean, where did you start? How did you, it's a complete revamp essentially, with the exception of maybe the TrialGB and the Trial 2 and expert classes. Everything else is sort of new for 2025.
I think what prompted it is, if you focus a minute on the main British Championship series, is the numbers have been dwindling the last sort of few seasons, and they've never been that strong in the last 5 years anyway. And I think, Hugo want to know, like, this year we've been down to like 45 riders, and when you then go and speak to the clubs, because this year, like rewinding, my role so far has been really around like how the events have been running and to see if we can get some consistency from one club to another. That's what I was doing over the last sort of year.
Yeah.
And it sort of worked quite well this year, and Hugo can talk as a rider, but all the numbers were low and they've become lower this year. And it's a case of what can we do anyway to make sure that it's worthwhile for any club to put on the British Championship trial, regardless of who's in it, the categories. Because we've lost so many, historical events, because the clubs either don't have the people power to put it on, or because they feel overwhelmed. An example is like Ripon, who I think run absolutely fantastic events, like the absolute best. They're not running next year. They openly said they need a breather. It's hard work, and it costs them a lot of money as well to hire the land and all the other sort of stuff that goes into it, which most people are aware of, but probably don't really consider. It's really, really difficult. So it's the starting point is, well, how can we make it more positive for everyone, make it more worthwhile? And the link to that, the easy solution is then to go and look at other countries to see how they do it and how they operate. And that's what we've done. So actually, like a lot of the changes, they're not pioneering. Spain and other countries have been running like this for years. And you'll know that you can speak more, can't you, as a rider the last year or two, not taking away the quality of the events and stuff, but just in general number of people that are there, riders and families and spectators.
Yeah, I think it seems it's most prevalent in the TrialGB through riders moving on and riders not coming up. And then also the expert class, isn't it? That is such a hard class to cater for everybody, I know, but numbers have noticeably, like the last 2 years probably, have been dropping in that, haven't they? Which I don't really know what the answer is as to why that is, but like you say, the events themselves have been great events.
Yeah.
It'd be great to get more people on.
My personal view on that was that at the start of this year, we had like a load of S3 nationals that are running into the start of the season. And so most riders that might be gearing up for like Scotland and other things, they would have been spending a lot of money just traveling to those trials. So then to throw in like another British Championship weekend away, because I was talking to some of the riders, I think we'll have to acknowledge, the last few years, since we've all come out of the like lockdown sort of world, everything's more expensive now, so it costs you a lot more money to put some diesel in the van and all that sort of thing. So moving anyway to like a 2-day weekend, but then fewer number of rounds, the purpose of that was to make it more commercially viable, like for anyone, like any family or rider that's going to go along. If you're going to travel all that way to somewhere in the country, we've got some riders that are now traveling quite a long way, good group from Scotland and our friends in Ireland and all that sort of stuff. Can we make it more commercially sensible for them to do that? So that's part of the 2-day thing as well, which is, if they're coming, get 2 days riding on your bike, make it a worthwhile journey.
Yeah, I think we might have spoken about it anyway before, Sam, but I'm totally agree with that. I think it's much better if you're going somewhere, make a weekend of it. It makes more of an occasion of the weekend, doesn't it, as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
I always remember like the weekends we had at Bob McGregor. They were some of like the best. It turned out to be some of the best trials when you're there for 2 days, didn't it?
Yeah, well, you get the camaraderie as well overnight, don't you?
Yeah, exactly.
And more of an event of it. But that was the background. So anyway, just the basic form of a 2-day trial. Like, why is it gone to do 2 days? And this isn't new though. Like, going back many years and under different iterations, we used to have a practice lap on a Saturday for British Championships.
I remember that.
To bed the sections in. I mean, like, it's the thing, Russell. I mean, I'm then it looks to see. I mean, I'm old enough to have been riding now through nearly every possible permutation of different rules that exist in trials. So I've seen it, seen and experienced all of it to some extent.
Yeah.
But look, it's been running like well, more like consolidated events as national series overseas for a long time. And it also then seemed like an obvious thing, a step to make, particularly when you look at, and Hugo, you mentioned this, like the youth and the talent, and how can we get them to sort of fast track up more so that the top classes, men and women, in theory, should look deeper than where they are now, like in the next 3, 4, 5,
Yeah.
6 years. And we've got some good riders coming through. That's the thing. That that was the other thing. Is like,
Yeah.
what can we do to support them? There's some really good boys and girls
Yeah.
and youngsters coming through. It's really promising. I was looking at the numbers actually, like all year I follow the events anyway, but the number of like British riders entered in like the World Round events
Mm.
in different classes, it's the healthiest we've seen for years.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's that in the background as well, which is if they are moving up and then they're moving abroad, you know, there is some logic then to try to mirror what's happening abroad. So for those that are on that pathway, it will feel less of a big jump once they've got across the channel and into France, Spain. Those events should run in a sort of similar way.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Yeah.
you're introducing that sort of familiarity there as well. And that's one less thing as a young rider coming up. That's one less thing to have to think about. Then, if you're already familiar with that type of a format, that type of an event, it's less of a it seems like it's less of a step maybe to make
Mm.
that transition.
It's also
Then just
less
on
of a
the
step. Oh, sorry, Sam. It's also less of a step up through the classes as well, isn't it? Because I'm going back a few years now, unfortunately. But when I was moving up from the youth, and you could there was the 125 support class. It was like a massive step up to try and ride that class in the experts. Whereas if you're there on the same weekend, it definitely can see how it would help you progress.
Yeah, I mean the being able to, as a kid, I remember this, like to go and ride even in a warm-up area, like with the top riders in that area, that country. I mean, it's brilliant. And
Yeah.
also afterwards to be able to go back and watch them ride. I mean, there's a lot to sort of be said about that. And
Yeah.
some of the youth, boys and girls, would never have experienced that yet. So, I fully expect them to be, really benefit actually from coming together over a weekend. But the one thing I was just going to add in though, Russell, is that this like 2 lap thing. It's an interesting one because I mean British Championships have always been run over 3 laps, 3 laps of 12.
Yeah.
I'm a fan of that. I love time on the bike. Again, if you're going to go somewhere,
Yeah.
but we've had to sort of be careful on this though because like logistically, with bringing in more classes,
Mm.
you almost just don't have enough time in the day to run like a 3 lap event with a bigger entry.
Yeah.
We've been running the maths on this in the background, and if everyone's starting at a minute and a half intervals, which they'd need to be, and you could end up with a fairly big entry starting at 8:30, but the event not finish until 6, and this just doesn't work for observers, spectators, and everyone. So a 2 lap trial is the only way logistics will actually make it work well and efficiently. But then, hence 2 days of it, at least you're still going to get then, a decent amount of time on the bikes. I think probably like 2 laps of 15 sections would be ideal.
I was
But
just
we
going to bring that
know
up. Yeah.
we know that Hugo, we know that you can't find observers.
That's another.
That it sounds silly as it is, but I know
Yeah.
that even most of the clubs that are running even next year, I don't know about you, Russell, but it is really hard to go and find like another 6 to 10 observers and volunteers.
Yeah.
So we have to be sort of considerate towards that because it's easy to create things that work just for a rider, but you got to think, the clubs and I've spoke a little bit to a few people when I've tried to give a bit of insight even this year, but there was one round, where the trial this year started without 2 observers manning sections because they hadn't arrived because the club was under pressure with observers, and with 9:30 the first rider had already gone off. So
There's nobody at
again,
the
like
last section.
riders don't even all see these things, but that's the reality,
Yeah.
and so with that as well, though, even like speaking to you, Russell, the ACU, the process historically has been for clubs to sort of request to run a British Championship trial. This year, we've taken a slightly different approach where we've targeted clubs or organisers that we know have got the sort of the capacity really to go and put on an event now of like the slightly bigger scale. And each purpose is an example. They're not actually a club. they're their own promoter as how they run. So, but they're like Matthew and Amy, they're massively energized at the moment to sort of help and push things forwards, not just for their own brands, but just the sport. And my goal is with it is actually, can we build out like more than four? Can we build out like quite a few clubs though, where we can rotate this from one year to the next? So not only are we moving grounds and locations, because I think that's healthy as well for riders, not always going back to the same place, which we do a lot in Britain, but also develop the organizer base as much as the rider base, so that we've got depth of clerks of courses and observers and lots of stuff that understand what national trials look like. Because at the moment the pool for that is quite narrow. So as soon as we get this like rolling for next year, I'll be thinking of who can we speak to for the year after, and can we get them involved so they can come and watch a bit next year, and what can we do to support them, as hosts effectively. And that really isn't easy. It's the one thing that riders generally, that maybe some of these keyboard warriors as well on social media, they just won't see that. I've been lucky because I come from a background of a club at Hook Wood. In 30 years we've had so many ups and downs with all of that, trying to get people along to help, and car park marshals and officials, and it's a huge amount of work, to pull in all those people.
There is so much that goes on to put an event on, isn't there, that when you turn up to ride, you don't necessarily see all that's gone into you and behind the scenes, even from like all the administration and paperwork side of it.
Yeah, it's huge. Yeah, it's really huge. I mean, my wife Sarah is our secretary for our British Championships, and it's months of work that people don't see. So we need to support the clubs, because many of the clubs are tired of this, and it comes back to the start, Russell, like, how can we even help the clubs? How can we get people more engaged? So if people are online and got a voice, that's brilliant. But why don't you put that energy then and getting down to your local club, going down to their committee meeting whenever they meet, and actually start getting involved, because it does need more people. To push it along at all levels, really.
I mean, just to go back to the sort of paperwork and everything else, like I was in rugby there on Saturday at the licensing seminar to get my clerk of course license and stuff. So I hope I passed. I think I passed. I think the round will go ahead. You're okay.
You might be in trouble if you don't.
I got 54. I got 54 out of 55 in the wee exam at the end, so I think we're good. I think we're all right.
But Russell, I haven't done that though, because I mean I've had my national clerk of the course license for years now, but people won't realise that how much stuff is actually involved, isn't it? It's not to do with like where the flags go. It's all of the sort of health and safety, the running, the safeguarding. I mean, there's just so much stuff. And sometimes I'd love to say to people, look, if you're, when they're giving feedback, well, come along though, go and get on the national seminar, the clerk of course, and contribute. But people are really blissfully unaware about that.
Pretty much. I've even started clearing some sections as well, so that's all sort of in hand as well. So that's just because I'm uber keen. But
they looked good as well. They looked good as well.
Yeah, you might not be thinking that when you see where the markers are going, though, Hugo. You might.
Why are they in the bottom, just along the back bit?
Yeah, just along the path at the bottom. That rock. No, I'm not going anywhere near that. Right. So, TrialGB, obviously that class is staying fairly much the same. Trial 2 will stay the same. Trial Expert, is that level going to change? Are we going to try and alter the level in that? Because obviously now that's where the TrialGB women are going to be sort of coming into the whole thing.
Yeah, I mean, this year anyway, apart from the top class, the goal was to try to moderate, all of the route, the severity, I suppose, because if you go back in 2023 back in the last 3 years of riding, coming into this year's series, like the average winning score on the expert route and trial 2 was phenomenally high. I think the average for both was between 60 and 70 marks per trial. And so even this year we've tried to sort of make it a lot more sensible even in trial 2, and it's why actually minders were removed for trial 2. It wasn't because we don't want them to have catches or help. It was to force the clerks of the courses to stop putting in things which were just becoming progressively too hard for the people that were entering the event. And I think next year, all of the classes will have to be sent out for the people that are actually in those routes, and even the top class, because I'm really hoping that like Jamie Galloway and maybe Duncan Call, and I don't know what Alfie would do, Alfie Lampkin, but I'd really hope they move up because they need to be if they're trying to push on more.
Yeah.
And if they do, then even that class needs to be moderated a bit, because obviously you've got quite a broad depth of experience then with the likes of the top 3 or 4 that have been doing world rounds a while. So it all just needs to be moderated for the people who are on that route. So yeah, to trial expert, definitely, because we're trying to really promote the women, then we can't have it too hard. It doesn't mean we can't have hard sections. And it goes back to this old the old theory of like, third easy, third medium, third hard. And we until this year, we'd lost our way a little bit in the series. I mean, like Hugo, even our route, I mean, we'd end up getting like 12 either medium sections. So there weren't anything easy. And they were all like quite tricky. You could have 5 any of them, you can have, be on a big score. So this year we've tried to make sure all the classes have had like at least a handful of sections where like the majority of that entry can clean and go around on a low number.
Yeah. I would, just to carry on that, I don't know whether it's worth speaking to the riders in the classes as well, because a lot of the feedback that I've heard from Trial 2, from being in it and listening to other people a little bit, is the general consensus was that it was probably too easy this year. Like, I know everybody still lost marks, but a lot of the trials were won on sort of 20 or below, which when you separate out per lap then is 6, 7 sort of marks, which is pretty tight scoring. And my personal opinion, I'd rather be losing, I don't know, like if you say the winner's on 40 or 50, something like that, at least then you're there to sort of show your ability rather than just try not to make little mistakes and have little dabs. And it's such a fine balance, I know, but I suppose you can always say move up to the top class then, can't you?
Well, that's the point, because you've got like some really talented riders in the expert series that have been there for a long time now.
Yeah.
And they should really move up. Some of
That
those
is one I
riders.
totally agree with
I've
you,
openly said the top 5 should go up into trial 2.
Yeah.
I know some of the ACU commission would like it to put a rule in that they just have to go up. And I'm not against that either. But
No,
I think it is
right
an interesting one though, because as an organizer as well, if you set out a hard trial where people are losing more, predominantly you get people that moan.
more
If
complaints,
you have
right?
an easier trial and people haven't killed themselves today, you're likely to get some people thank you for the event. And then when you look at the world round scores, they're incredibly low.
Yeah,
So
they
then you
are.
have to question. I don't disagree, or I accept your point, but when we think of the numbers that are coming to events, I sat there and looked at it even last year going, hang on a second, we've even got the top 3 or 4 riders in our country traveling and spending thousands of pounds to go and do like a 1-day world round and go round on a lap score of 5 or less or win. So why do we in England? It's just an open question. Like, why do we need to kill everyone, and why do they need to be winning on 80 marks then? Like, is there a disconnect, somewhere? Because they'll happily drive 1,000 miles to go and do 2 laps of 12 sections and lose 10 marks. And so it's also about building into that though, because unless you go around clean in a trial, which no one ever does,
that is what. Yeah.
then it's still been hard enough, isn't it?
Yeah, in a sense, yeah.
So I it's finding the balance though of just having enough like testing sections, but we need to get the entries back up though. And like in the past, if you look at any like national or even like the Scottish 6 Days trial, when it was on its knees in the 90s, it's because it became too hard on those rules at the time, and then you just lose all the entries basically.
Yeah. No,
And it is a big challenge. It's a big challenge because we all come at it from a different perspective. My driver is like to benefit the youth and their pathway, but also
which is the most important.
bring the
Yeah.
entries up as well for the host, because otherwise you
Hmm.
won't have any clubs wanting to run, British Championships in a few years' time if they've already got 40, 50 riders.
Yeah.
And look at the S3 Nationals though, Hugo. You go and ride them as well as I do, but we'll happily go and travel miles to ride round for less than 10
Well,
marks.
this sort of
Some
brings me
those
on
events.
to the point I was just thinking of in my head then. I suppose the top 10 in Trial 2 in the World Rounds are probably traveling thousands of miles because they've got a bit of a deal and they're striving to get to the top class. If they probably ask them the same question, they'd probably rather not be there losing 10 in a trial. But one thing, it sort of comes down to the style of sections as well for me. Like if you could lose, say, 50 in a trial, and they're quite straightforward flowing sections that you can have a really good go at, and personally, I'd probably say you'd had a really good day and enjoyed yourself. Or you could lose 50 and have been turning up your own armpit all day like this, and you really wouldn't have enjoyed it. So there's so many factors, isn't there? I totally appreciate your point of trying to build entries as well, Sam, and I agree with you really, but there's just a lot to take on board, isn't there?
Yeah, it is though. The biggest thing that I find the most interesting, I'll be careful what I say it's a tiny bit, but this year we introduced a consultation period though, which you as riders you were all aware of, and could come and speak to me or the clerk of the course at any point. Well, I can tell you now,
Did you?
only 2 or 3 riders max any British Championship would come and talk to us.
Yeah.
So when I was hearing people moaning every weekend, I had zero sympathy. I'm not riding as well with you guys,
Yeah.
and I've got zero sympathy. I think, well, if you go and speak to old clerk of the course, he might have done something about it, but there's no point coming back afterwards moaning if it was this, that, and the other or whatever, because there was the 2 or 3 as well. I won't put names. The 2 or 3 that would come up, they were the only ones that come up consistently every trial. And it says something that and I don't think you need to be a scientist to work out as well, like where they might finish overall. But it's the good riders are really, those riders that are sort of striving, they're really engaged with this and they take it seriously, and they'll always contribute positively.
Yeah.
That's what I find most interesting with even these changes. I was saying to Russell earlier before you came on, Hugo, I mean, I'm actually on any social media. I've got no Facebook accounts. I'm blissfully unaware in terms of what anyone's saying. But have you ever, ask yourselves though, do you ever see a top rider online moaning about anything? Now, if they're going to grumble, it'll be quietly in the background. And if they come to you, or I've certainly seen them come to me, it will always be with constructive comments. I think it's a really telling trait. Basically, is all my encouragement to any budding young rider. It's how you conduct yourself. And my dad and I were reminiscing about this recently because so I grew up in the Dougie Lampkin era, and I remember when Dougie was winning his first 4 titles. The Spanish were fuming because obviously they'd had this massive run with Geordie, not consecutive 7 titles for Geordie, but near enough. And then I think it was 2000, they started to tinker with the rules because they were desperate for a Spanish champion again. Well, Duggan, like his dad Mahat, they never said it in public ever, and they just quietly get on with it in the background. And every time the Spanish changed the rules again, and we must have flip-flopped every year for 4 years. He just dug even deeper, and he got even further ahead. So I'm sort of maybe old school with this anyway. I'm thinking, look, just go riding between the flags. What Doug and his dad always said, and don't expend your energy on all this sort of stuff.
Yeah,
just get your head down and get riding. And we I think that sort of guidance would help a lot of people generally, regardless of what the rules are and how many laps there are and where the trial is and what sort of section it is.
Yeah, let your riding do the
It's the same with when you look at reviews for a product or on a owners group for a car, you only see the people complaining about the problems, don't you? You don't see that there's nobody there shouting up how good it is.
Nobody ever rarely ever leave a good review. It's only ever bad. So yeah. Right. So there's below the expert line, expert stroke trial GP or GB, sorry, women. There's a new line then coming in for, I should also say on that actually that the trial youth A are going to be riding that line now, which is essentially sort of going back to what happened a few years ago with the trial 125 class, I suppose, which Harry and George and Jamie and all those guys sort of came up through anyway. So I think that is a very positive move actually to have that class back in there. But also then sort of taking a step back from that, the youth B and what is going to be, is it trial 2 ladies and youth A girls? Is that correct?
Yeah, and youth
it's
B
going to,
boys.
yeah, is going to ride a line that's going to be slightly easier again than the expert line. So there's going to be 4 lines in total now at a TrialGB round.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, because I mean, we've been hosting even some of the youth nationals of the last year or well, for a long time actually. But you know, and again, if you look at the pathway, there are challenges with that, certainly from my perspective. And it didn't help. I think it was now 10, 15 years ago when the A and B class dropped into consolidated series with the C and D. And you know, if you've got like a really good A or B class rider, they will naturally need to be even riding through an area of a bit of land that's going to be a lot more challenging than the C and a D or even an E class bike. You know, so that just will hold them back. You know, they need to be up riding like bigger events on much more sort of challenging sort of sections than what they have been. But and again, I need to be sort of delicate because you know, we've got a good like strong youth sort of parent group and sort of rider base. But I think the reality anyway, that even you gave them like your views on sections. I think the reality is that actually the level overall potentially at the moment overall in depth is probably not as strong as it has been in like different generations.
No,
And I
I'd
say that
agree
very
with you.
carefully because we have to be sort of sensitive to that. And what I mean is that you know, we've got at the moment maybe in every class, like nationally, you know, 1 or 2 riders, boys or girls, that are clearly like really strong. Like one of the things I've tried to get the ACU to do for next year, which they are, which I think is brilliant, is no longer holding some of these like youth riders back into like any category because of their age.
That's a great
And
move.
so, you know, it doesn't make any sense because
Yeah.
otherwise those Clarks the courses are really finding it tough because they've got to try and set out a trial for 1 or 2 or 3 riders that are really good and the others which are still developing. And they might get there. And so you can't undermine anything they're doing. But I think it's just got to allow people to progress at their own pace and at their own rate. So
Yeah.
by opening it up and putting the A class in particular and the Bs and the youth girls A like into that series where they're going to be exposed to sort of a different type of section, I think should be really good for all of them. You're not just from the fact that the promotion that I get and the exposure of the other riders, but just the type of section alone is just going to look so different to some of the like really tight and twisty schoolboy stuff that goes on
Yeah.
next to C and D route. You know, and people forget this though. People forget that you know, like when A and B was always separate years back. From the CDs and E's, you know, boys, girls are relevant to gender there, just the classes. So
Yeah. When I
actually, I
was
think
doing
that
it, it
does
was
need to go back a little bit.
yeah. When I was doing it, I only started in the B class towards the end of it, but they were A and B were separate then, and they were proper trials. Reinforcing Sam's point a little bit of, for me, D and C is more about just getting the kids, be it boys or girls, just to enjoy themselves on a bike, really, isn't it? And it's when you get to sort of the B class level where you really start to sort of formulate that higher skill level sort of thing. So having it involved with the rest of the championship at that point seems like a really good move to me.
Yeah. Sam's not convinced.
Yeah, no, I am. Yeah, yeah. I mean, it just the sections going back to section severity though for all of these classes. That's going to be the hardest thing. Is just making sure that we get the severity right because it's. So as my point I was trying to make earlier is that in every category we're catering for quite a broad rider ability. You know, in every you can look at Trial Expert at the moment. You know, you got the top 3 or 4 that have been quite away from. I always look at 15th place in the scores, a point scorer. You know, and what we don't want though in any of the classes. There's like a massive gap between 15th and the top three, which we've had a lot in every, even youth. You don't want that really. So hence, those top 3 or 4 that are so far ahead should be moving on up the ranks, even if it's a youth. So if we've got a good C class rider, the new rules will say, well, get up there with a B class then, basically. And if they're an exceptional B, I've already been on email with the commission on this for some of the riders. We'll get them up into A. Let's not constrain them. Because the old handbook says they have to be sort of pegged back because of their age. It's not a safety issue, you see. As long as they're on a 125, these younger riders, there's no safety issue connected to it or insurance. So, and again, if you look overseas, it's what they do abroad. I mean, there's talent coming through over there, like especially in Spain still. It's really really healthy. So we just need to give our
line there.
Yeah. Need to give our riders as much of a head start as possible.
It's helping people up, isn't it? Not like putting ceilings in place all the time.
Yeah. But it is like I think it's going to be next year is going to be like a teething year to some extent, like a new format. But I think really hope in the next year or two it'll help a lot of that younger riders, the boys and girls, springing through quicker. And if you look at the women in particular, I mean, what we really want to see is more women, and on the TrialGB, but more women in the top class.
Yeah.
There's got to be a goal, surely, is to sort of have like depth again of rider and more of, those girls coming through. So really look forward to seeing, that class hopefully develop out a little bit. That'll be quite difficult. To achieve, and it won't happen overnight, but I think in the next few years it'd be a really good target.
I think that's an important point there, maybe, that you've just made, is that it's not an instant, it won't be an instant fix necessarily. There might be some little things that over the course of the next couple of years that maybe need tinkered with or adjusted or whatever, but it's more of a 5-year plan rather than an instant fix to all that we've been talking about.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny you mention that, because I pitched this sort of the theory behind this to the ACU chairman way back in early summer, and my whole concept was, how can we put like the riders on the international map, and with the Trials as Nations as a prominent feature of measuring success. And now clearly the women's team have had phenomenal success in that. So for them, it's a case of, okay, well, what can the sport do to support them more, and where's the longevity and sustainability in it? And then for the men's team, it's like, well, where are we at the minute? Because we're well behind our our friends in France, Italy, and Spain, like a long way behind. Last time we won that was in 2003. So my whole thinking on it was that surely as a country has to be our measure. Where do we end up on the broader global map with all this sort of talent? And so when you come back to the changes and even the series and even severity, and for me, it has to sort of fall into, where do we hope all these riders could be in the next sort of 1 to 3 and then 3 to 5 years? So 3-year cycles, I think, is quite a healthy one to look at. And then coming back to the commercials, how can we make it more viable for them? To have Toby Martin this year, choose to ride in the US because it's the only way he's going to get a bit of money paid. I mean, that just feels so wrong. In so many ways, and I'm not knocking Toby for that. It's the reality actually of where the sport is.
Forced into that,
and even what you're saying earlier, Hugo, I know a lot of the riders are contractually, and even going abroad, they don't get paid much money, if anything, to go to a world round even. They're going there out of the pure love of it. And so, can we do things even here which might help them all attract a bit more of their own personal private sponsors? Even down from the youth, the youth up. So there's Charles is never going to be like a high paying sort of profile sort of sport, but I'm sure we can do more on the way to sort of make that journey sort of more of an efficient and effective one for anyone that's looking to go down it. I've been in the ACU's ear a lot as well on this, in terms of where they can step in more and the funding, the whole thing. My mum campaigned a lot at the start of this year, and she's pulled a load of training together. My mum's on the ACU Trials Commissions, but pretty much done it all herself, which was just to go and call in a few £100 from loads of different people, I mean, training days, I don't know if you followed this at all. They've now started to, James, I think, and Emma, we've had the Hemingways do them. So
I
those
saw a
riders
few,
are getting
They did one
getting
at
paid a bit.
Scarborough, I think, didn't they, earlier in the year?
Yes. Yeah. So
Mm.
those riders are getting paid a bit of pocket money, which helps them for their funding. But then the kids are getting trained.
Yeah.
So it's those initiatives that we want to try and build on a lot more to, around the country, give access to some coaching and help the riders that need the help.
Yeah, definitely.
Because it's very difficult. Like sponsorship at the moment, it's really tough. I mean, the importers are all struggling. And I just to add as well, I don't want to like drop names, but we went and spoke to all of the main importers and sought their feedback and input on all of this before we even started to like put pen to paper, because we really thought it was important to, they're key stakeholders in the industry to sort of speak to them in the main teams and get their take on everything. And many of them, some have been brilliant, and they've got a real vested interest in obviously things because they're trying to make a living out selling bikes and products. But beyond that, though, they recognise the benefit, with all of this because they're trying to nurture the kids along, and all of the youth to make it just more of a healthier sort of like business for them as well. Because without that, it just all falls flat. And so the dealers, I mean, people probably don't really realize, but the dealers and the bike market, it's really tough at the moment. I think you said earlier, Hugo, even like numbers, people are just spending less generally.
Yeah, I think it probably does come down to that overall, doesn't it?
So there's that's not something which a national championship can fix, but we hope though by at least aligning it and running it as a sort of a bigger event, it should, in theory.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a factor. It's a factor that as the governing body, they need, you need to be aware of because it's going to affect entries. It's going to affect everything really, bike sales, you name it. So you need to consider that when you're putting the series together, which obviously you have. So yeah, fair play. So
yeah, I mean it's a big consideration. I mean, I don't actually have a formal role in rugby, but I mean, if I were in charge though, I would put up the license fees. I wouldn't hesitate.
Yeah,
I mean, I'd do exactly the same.
Yeah,
they're cheap as chicks, aren't they? But I mean, I would put that up and use that money to put into these series.
absolutely.
I know it's a sensitive one because they're trying to show value, and again, like many riders that come to the British Championships won't recognise that the ACU is under pressure from other bodies running events like the AMCA and that sort of thing. And there's been a lot of clubs that have shifted for different reasons. So there's other things that in the background, other forces that just most riders and families aren't even aware of. But there's possibly some things that could be done there, but I've got no influence over that. I'll happily voice my opinion on it. But
yeah,
you'll end up with
before,
another job. Right. So I think we've covered everything then, I suppose, really for TrialGB. So then the youth championships and the ladies and girls championships are going to look quite different as well. Now I haven't sort of been focusing as much on that because obviously I'm not running around in their championship, although I'm not saying I wouldn't. Be very happy to run around if they would come over. So run us through the changes that are going to take place there, Sam, in those two.
I mean, the theme and the thread of just trying to run like consolidated series to make it more sort of financially viable for everyone has just followed on then into the remaining sort of other like classes for girls and boys. So it just didn't seem to make sense to sort of run the girls' youth championship separate to the other boys' classes for a start. I don't know, people have been sort of maybe a bit sensitive towards this, but the danger is though all we're doing otherwise is diluting an already diluted sport.
Yeah,
and people don't get that really. Trials are really under pressure with all the other things that people can go and do nowadays. The other extra, curricular sort of stuff. And so, I've said for a long time, certainly to the ACU, we need to think of this as like one community because we're such a small community, aren't we? Really, and everyone knows everyone, and we need to work together and help each other out a bit more. So that was the thinking, just with the youth, which is okay. Like if we're gonna run consolidated, what can we do with the youth, and can we then try and do that in a way where they also benefit from categories which will allow for a bit of a broader rider ability. So we've got 4 now classes in there, which starts from the effectively like the D class on the small wheel bikes, and then opening up the age bands, so that it allows riders just to develop, at their own pace, boys and girls, in their physical size, just to give them enough age band within all of those like bike sizes, wheel sizes to 125. And sort of just let the series run based more on, again, like rider ability rather than a particular sort of age description. Which is what I said on this like Zoom call a few weeks ago, which is exactly what happens when you go to a local trial. If you enter any normal trial, apart from a national event, you basically enter the class that you want to ride on the bike you're allowed to ride based on your age update, and that's it. And that's sort of what we want to do with the youth, which is, okay, well, let's just think about how like very successful pub events run, where everyone's very happy. But can we do that in a way though where it threads into the main series? So obviously we've tried to then look at the format, and even then like the color coding of flags, and the regs generally, because the regs for the women's and girls' youth have been very different to the boys' stuff and the main TrialGB the last years. I mean, completely different set of regulations. And the youth event's also been running pretty much just in terms of how that club wants to run it. So what we've tried to do is put a standard framework in place, and the bit that we need to do next is just find one or some people that can become the sort of the stewards of those effectively and work with those class of courses so that the series does run to regulations. And we've had I mean, there's one person from Scarborough, but there's been some really, really positive input from parents on the youth side of this. Because, I'm not best placed, to talk about the youth in any great detail, because I've not been going to that many youth nationals the last few years, just the odd one here and there. But I do have kids that ride though. I've got a 13 and 11-year-old that ride trials. So I've had my own views anyway when I watch them at Hookwood, when we've got obviously a lot of some really good like riders down where we are in our area, some really good CB riders and younger coming through. So I'm sort of, I'm around them quite a lot, and where I can as well, I still do a bit of coaching with some of those riders because they're part of our local club. So I'm aware of the ability, and it's also seeing them thinking, okay, well, you can sort of see how they need to be challenged now going forwards to really, progress them. But what we don't want to do again is we don't want to do something just for one or two. It's got to be managed in a way which caters for, a bigger audience. So I'm really hoping with a consolidated youth series, again, we should see like much bigger entry numbers at those events. Which should just really help everyone. And again, we're trying to do some of those as 2-day trials. It's finding the clubs that, again, will have the energy to put it on and the land, etc. But then we've got a couple at least which are 2-day events. I say Scarborough in particular have been fantastic because they put their hand up quickly to say, look, we'll happily run a 2-day event. And they've also said they'll happily run a test event in the early new year, which we've got to get around to organising. I think that's brilliant. I think, that they're the places where we need to be going as riders anyway. Like, go to the clubs that are really enthused by all of this stuff and, want to give things a crack. So I think I'm really excited about next year. So they're going to, they're going to open the youth series and they're going to close off the last round of the main TrialGB, which will be really cool.
Yeah, cool.
Test event would be great. I would love to see one of those.
Well, there was one last year, and it seemed pretty good to gauge the level of everything, didn't it, and how it was going to work.
I think Amy at Inch Perfect would quite like to see one as well, because I have to say I don't envy them running the first round of the championship. It could go either way, that one. But I think they've got enough experience there to know what they're at anyway. But yeah, the best event would be very useful, I think, just and get everybody together, get all the Clarks, the courses, and everybody there. I think would be, I'd certainly be up for that. Who would be for a trip to Scarborough?
Sorry.
Go ahead. No, crack on.
How many of the youth and I don't know what you would call it, but the younger youth championship rounds are there, Sam?
I think
plan to do?
I think it's five. I think there's two-day events
Yeah.
that are all point scoring, and I think there's three individual day trials. So they basically have
Okay. So sort of
yeah, 7 point scoring
7.
rounds. Yeah. That's all they need. I mean, people are
Yeah.
campaigning for more, but knowing how hard it is to get these things on and the diaries squeeze anyway, because that's the other thing people
Yeah.
don't realise is that
Mhm.
Ross and I've been talking this, that the dates, I mean, like you don't get first picking on any of this sort of stuff. The AC wait for all of the European, the world, and then the S3 nationals going there, then Scotland, and you're not actually left with many weekends. And if that
It's
club
funny
have only
that,
got
yeah.
permission to use that land at a certain time because it's like lambing season or something else,
Hmm.
it's not straightforward.
No.
But I think, we don't need to have series which are full of like loads and loads of weekends away. Um,
Hmm.
which is why also like it should all be point scoring and no rounds dropped.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, definitely.
I just had the thought, basically, what you were saying about the ACU training days that a couple like the Hemos did one and things. Could there be an opportunity to where there's a single day round, an opportunity to sort of combine that onto a Saturday? Was what was ticking away in my head. That was all. As in,
Definitely. Yeah,
yeah,
that 100%.
Well,
Um,
funny you should say that actually, but I was actually thinking of other ways that I could, because obviously my round is going to be the most expensive round for people to come to because obviously there's a ferry.
I thought you were putting us all up.
Yeah, well, we'll try our best as well. I've got a load of tents that are going to go in the back garden here. Um, I was trying to think of ways to sort of make it a bit less of a, um, yeah, just a bit less of a for a financial burden on people. But I was thinking of maybe trying to do something either on the Friday or the Monday. Like maybe leave the sections marked if anybody wants to stay and go practicing on the Monday, or maybe run a coaching day or test day or whatever, just to try and
Yeah,
make my sort of vibe for the weekend is going to be like a festival of trial. So that's sort of what I'm thinking of at the moment, and I've spoken to a couple of people over here in the industry, and they would be sort of quite up for that, sort of like test days and stuff. So you never know.
yeah,
We'll see what we can do.
that sounds pretty good. So
that
to
sounds
me,
great. Yeah.
that's a little bit of one thing that's gone missing out of it is like I take it back to like the inter-centre team trial years ago, like,
Enjoyment.
and yeah, like that like festival of try. Everybody was there. The youth on the Saturday, they all stayed Saturday night, had a great time, made a load of friends. Rode Sunday. It just, I don't know. It seems like that enjoying it ultimately is what gets people to go, isn't it? So finding ways around the event that make it enjoyable as well increases
It's funny
things.
you mentioned that. I've only got one picture of me on the bike up in the house. That's up there. That's actually from the Intercentre team trial, Hugo, in
Is it?
2000 and oh gosh, now I think it's 8 or something. And they
Yeah.
only ran another year after that. But we had that weekend. It was at Hook Wood. We had
Mm.
something like a couple of hundred riders.
Yeah.
Youth the day before. We had a massive marquee up. We had a bar in there. We had music
Mm.
and a band. It was just an absolutely brilliant weekend.
Yeah.
Brilliant weekend.
That's
And that for me, I look back at the same as you and I go, but that comes from building up the organizer base again, though.
yeah. You
But effectively,
I'd
and
say you've got to start
that's
there,
why,
haven't you? Like,
yeah. And so, like, even when we're talking all this sort of stuff through and hearing all the riders, there's one bit of me think is still thinking, no, actually, in the next few years, the organizer base though has to be in a part of the agenda of growth, because without that, you can't do all that fun stuff. You're left with just a handful of people that they get tired of it. But yeah, I
yeah.
mean, they were brilliant trials
Mm.
in centres.
They were.
Um,
Yeah.
fantastic weekends away. But
Yeah.
always good as well when the Southeast beat Yorkshire, which we did a few times.
I might
Gotta
have to
get that
cut.
in
Might
there.
have to cut that bit out. Right.
That
Um,
always actually sort of upset my Uncle Malcolm as well, because obviously we'd been running Jive in the family, because for a long period he was the team manager. So there's always quite a good bit of banter on the Monday afterwards if we won that.
yeah. All picture, no sound. Right. Have we covered everything, Sam? Is there anything more you wanna go over on that, or?
No, I think it's all good really. I mean, we can spend endless
Yeah, you could spend.
hours and
Right.
weeks on this, and like someone else said to me, you can literally be debating every nuance of all of this sort of stuff
Exactly.
endlessly. You know, we got a few weeks ago, because I'm busy with my own job and my work, and like the ACU stuff on top is really consuming. And I don't get paid. I've actually do not want any financial reimbursement in that sense for sort of my contribution to the sport. I think that'd be like, you know, wrong in so many ways. And also, I don't think it allowed me to be as unbiased as I am, you know, with all this. Because a lot of people say, why are you even doing this?
Yeah.
It's just because I love the sport like everyone else, you know. I love
it.
going to the trials. Just really want to see the you know, all of this sort of flourish the next sort of 5-10 years. But you know, yeah, at some point that you have to draw the line under this, because I've had so many messages even since Zoom call going, why are we doing this and why is it I do that, or you know, why not this? It's like, well, it's not perfect. It'll never be
Yeah, but I
perfect.
think you have to draw the line somewhere, like you say there, because you can't have. I mean, I think maybe I can only go from my experience with trials here, and it's almost like a different grade for every different group of friends, sort of thing. And you can't have that at a championship. There has to be a level. There has to be a benchmark.
Yeah.
And like I realized it many years ago that I wasn't at that benchmark anymore, and you know, stopped riding championships and stuff. But I think that's maybe part of the sort of harsh reality of it all too. That you know, if you have to accept sometimes if you're not good enough to ride a championship, then you're not going to be riding a championship.
That's part of competition, isn't it? Not everybody
Exactly.
can win or be on the podium. It is a scale to work your way up, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely. And I think mainly like last comments on this are, it's like this should always be like work in progress. And I think it's great people that have been online contributing, you know, viewpoints. And the one thing I sort of managed to get the new trials commission, which was like the old trials and enduro committee, because if people aren't aware, it's been split. So as of January, we've got a whole new look structure within the ACU, and then next year there'll be a new chairperson because it's going to sort of vote, and so there's a lot of sort of changes going in the background. But the one thing I sort of keep asking them was, please, can we just keep this like open to change?
Yeah.
It's not that you want to be flip-flopping every week, but I think we just have to recognize if some things work, then that's great. If it doesn't work, well, like any business organization, then let's just fix it. But for the last sort of 3 or 4 or 5 years, it's been pretty rigid. And so there's not really been any dialogue from the riders, you know, back to organizers to ACU. So I just hope all I, you know, intend to be is just the intermediary, if you like, of conversations, because you just need to be flexible on it, don't we? And adapt.
Yeah. It's I think you said it before, it's going to evolve, isn't it, over the years? If something's not right, it doesn't mean it's going to be there forever, does it? You can change it.
No, because Hugo, because like when we first announced this stuff, I not spoke to you, but because Ross and I've had a few chats, but I said to someone a few times though, so if it all fails, don't worry, we'll go back to what we were doing. I mean, there's no big drama.
Yeah.
But people have been creating like a mountain out of a molehill on some stuff. Well, don't worry, like if it's that rubbish after round one,
Yeah.
we'll revert. Or
Yeah.
so let's just be a bit more open-minded to
I think the worst thing you can do. I think the worst thing you can do in that situation is not try anything. You know, I think even if it's a bad decision, a decision is better than no decision.
So I was just said, like, I'd encourage people to have an open mind and give it a go. I saw quite a lot about on the ladies and girls thing, people not being that open to the changes, and I think you'd be surprised if they came and give it a go, how welcome and how sort of similar it can be to ride with the boys or the men. It's not like the big scary world it might appear. And like my comments about the section severity, it's not to have a whinge, it's all to try and get it to the best place it can be in it.
Yeah. All good.
I think on the women, it's a really tricky one, because I've seen I heard some of those that are unhappy, but I think they don't necessarily see that it could be better. And what they have been doing, you know, and I say this very carefully because I'm not like, it's been fantastic what people have been doing today in any trial that's put on.
Yeah.
But I genuinely think though it can be better. And I think if you look at the numbers as well, though, there's a danger as well of if there's no change there, they will naturally lose the depth of numbers in those higher classes. Because, for example, whenever Emma decides to sort of step away, that's like obviously will be like a massive loss at in the top class, and you think TDN team again.
Yeah.
And then where's the rest coming through? As in the youth girls A, Bs, because there's not like loads, and there's some really good riders. Really, what we want is the depth of it.
Yeah.
So we need to do something to address the depth if we want to sort of get somewhere and sustain that. So yeah, it's not about undermining anything or saying what they've been doing isn't being good. It's been great, but I just think it could be made better. And proof will be in the pudding, won't it? So
yeah, it seems to me like it's just going to build on, like they've done a great job in getting that ladies and girls championship going. It's just to build on that and give it the sort of the wider platform and recognition. Because if you didn't follow the Facebook group, you wouldn't necessarily see a lot of it, was my impression of it. So giving them the platform to be recognised more is only a good thing, really.
Yeah.
I mean, Emma's been a multiple world champion, and a bit like when Dougie was here, but but no one knows of them in the sport outside of trial. Sorry, and that's really poor, isn't it? On the our sports part, that they're not more widely recognised. Emma's not as a exceptional sort of women's athlete, and so you just think, oh, the next crop, the next Emma Bristow, surely we've got to give them a better platform to shine whenever they get there. So yeah, I think that's like there's a lot of positives that can come out of that.
Yeah, just thinking about that actually. I know it's a bit off topic, but actually, she must be the most successful female motorcyclist of all time, regardless. So yeah, it's a shame that she's not like a household name, really. But there you go. That's why you're changing what you're changing and trying to make that different for the next generation.
Yeah, I mean, Emma's been brilliant as well. Like I saw Emma's sort of counsel on all this sort of stuff, and I know some reservations of like the younger girls coming in with the boys, and I'm not sure about that. And Emma, I've debated it, but I've got a girl and a boy, and they're both excelling in their sports. And many of the pathways in the academies of other sports, though, they don't isolate the girls from the boys. Most of these academy structures in all sports, those top kids are training regardless of gender until they get to a certain size. And even in rugby, and I live in Twickenham, so it's the home of like England rugby. Even rugby though, the girls up until like 10 or 11, at least, are playing contact with the boys.
Yeah.
And they're developing their skill sets all the time. And that rubs out to loads of other sports. So I'm exposed to quite a lot of other things through family. And we also as a family run a football club. And so you just sort of think, actually, there's a lot of things you can take from other sports. Trials is quite slow on that. But there's so much learning we can seek from other sports that run, across the country, particularly with the development of like boys and girls. And the Olympic sports are the obvious ones to look at, where there's a long history of developing everybody. So I think, that actually the move on this should be really good for all of those youth riders.
Yeah.
I hope it is as well,
Yeah. I think overall, I think it's a step in the right direction. I think, yes, there probably will be a few teething troubles, like with everything new. Probably mostly around level of sections, I'm thinking, probably initially. But from the sporting side of things, everybody's been running trials for ages. So, I don't think that's going to happen. But I think it's really important that the levels of the sections are got right from the start, or as good as they can be. So that's probably the only thing which could sway some people in some direction about it, maybe. But I think it's a positive move forward.
Well, thanks for having me on, Russell. Nice to see you, Hugo.
Yeah, and you, Sam.
No problem. Thank you very much for taking the time.
We can do another one of these after like round 1 or 2, can't we? Then when all the custard pies have been thrown at us, we can reflect.
Yeah, we can. Yeah, hopefully not too many. No, thanks for your time. Thanks for taking the time to come on. Obviously, Thanks for all that you've done in the background as well, putting all that together, because it's not an easy thing to do, a time-consuming thing and everything else, especially when you have a 9 to 5 day job and everything else to going on. So,
no, thanks for your effort, Sam.
yeah.
No worries. Let's keep talking anyway. Hope see you soon, Hugo, somewhere. And yeah, Ross,
Yeah.
I'll be in touch. An email. So